Thank you so much to Administrator Criswell for not only joining us today, but even recently coming to visit so many of our communities in New York, as well as across the country, who are so deeply devastated by Hurricane Ida. And also for, in addition to that, your flexibility in implementation of our COVID Funeral Fund program, which has helped families all across the country help recover from the devastation of the pandemic, in addition to some of the other natural disasters we've been seeing across the country. Chairwoman, I would like to seek unanimous consent to submit a record, to the record a full testimony of one of my constituents, Daluara Ahmed, regarding their experience post-Hurricane Ida.
Without objection.
Thank you. Daluara, alongside many others, wrote to my office, quote, "I looked out the window and saw cars uncontrollably adrift during the Ida floods. A woman wading waist deep in the street, people yelling for help." These are some of the images that we saw across the district. And I strongly believe that FEMA can play an active role in mitigating an experience like theirs. Now, earlier this year, Administrator Criswell, you told the New York Times that the risk we are seeing from climate change are the crisis of our generation. And I think that you're right. When we look at the numbers after doing some digging, according to the agency's data, in 2005, there were 48 major disaster declarations. That was in 2005, 48 disaster declarations. Now, in 2020, there were 104 major disaster declarations, more than double that number. Now, the Climate Research Commission by the City of New York projected that in 2015, the number of days with rainfall of at least 4 inches would increase by as much as 67% by the end of the decade. And that's compared to the period between 1971 to 2000. Is FEMA operating and planning ahead with similar projections for the climate crisis?
Congresswoman, thank you again for, hosting me in New York City and being able to see some of the impacts that we saw or that people experienced from Hurricane Ida, completely devastating to many of those individuals. And I think, the data that you just mentioned, what that highlights is the thing that I'm stressing here is that we have to stop focusing all of our efforts on historical risk, the historical risks that we've faced in the past, and look to our future risk and better understand what that future risk might be. That's hard to do because it's not tangible. You can put your finger on what happened in the past and build to that. But we have to be able to be comfortable with understanding the potential for the future risk and the investments that it's going to take in order to protect against that future risk. And so I am committed with my team to working with locals as they are upgrading their mitigation plans, as they are looking at what their future risks will be, to help them better understand what that future risk, that future threat from climate change is going to be.
Thank you so much, Administrator. And if you could list some of the measures, one of the things that I've been thinking about is that as climate change gets worse, the way that we're going to have to approach not just disaster response, but disaster prevention is really going to have to evolve with the increasing threats that we have. And that includes our approach within FEMA. And so my question for you is if you could list some measures that would aid or assist in shifting FEMA's role in responding to more frequent natural disasters, what would some of those measures be? Is it more funding for staff? Is it a kind of increasing into or growing into disaster prevention, streamlined response measures during disaster relief time, internal reorganizations? From your bird's eye view, what are some of the things that we need to know on the congressional side, whether it's the potential for expanding authorizations, et cetera, that you see is going to be necessary in the coming years and decades?
It's a great question. And I think there's two things that I would talk about right now. And one, we used to see a very cyclical disaster response cycle where we would reset in the winter time and get ready for the next disaster season. And we don't see that any longer. Our team has been working hard, and now they are working year round to support the different types of weather events that we're seeing. And that's just going to continue. And so we are taking a hard look at how do we now create a year round disaster workforce that can keep up with the demand end of the disasters that we're seeing. But I think the only way that in the long term we're going to continue to be able to keep up with this is reducing the impacts so we don't have to respond as much. And the way we do that is through mitigation. And so we need to continue to educate communities about the importance of reducing the impacts, putting in community-wide mitigation projects in order to protect their citizens.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.